Hello, I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP. And first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for viewing this video. This is an impromptu video, so it's not within the safety of my room and the setup of the typical lighting and things like that. So I will apologize for the aesthetic qualities of this video, though those aren't things I really take much into account anyways in the videos I make, but I do apologize for the presentation. Either way, this video will be on the topic of learning and creativity, or the burden of creativity and the disconnect in the current academic setting, per se, and way of learning. So, I am drawing this from my own personal experience, and I do not. It is from my own personal experience and my own logical connectives, per se. I will reference some data and things, but the largest scope of data that I'm drawing this from is my own personal experience. And I will say this, that if somebody has not gathered that I am a creative type of individual and I have the characteristics of a creative individual, then that's not something I can prove or explicate per se. It's something I know by way of my own personal experience. No one had to tell me I was, well, people did explain to me I was a creative person. I did not know that always necessarily. I assumed people experienced the world and understood things the way I did from an early age, to where when I got older, increasingly I found that out not to be true. And this is where I would like to talk about somewhat of the dynamics between people who load high in the trait of openness to experience versus people who are highly conscientious. People who are highly conscientious are dutiful and are concerned with organizing patterns of sociality and constructing their environments and reality to be something that is predictable, that is reliable, and that is consistent. So these people like what they know more than what they don't know. And they tend to like to harmonize and cultivate the space of known materials and be masters and kings of that domain. So you find that conservative people, they do not necessarily build the businesses, but they take over the businesses of entrepreneurs. They buy them from the entrepreneurs when the entrepreneurs have stirred up profit and value in them. They buy these things and then make them the Fortune 500 companies, or essentially kick Steve Jobs out of his company. That's what conscientious people do, per se. They're not in the domain of creativity nor managing the unknown space, but they are in the domain of managing and being the managerial and administrative agents in the known space, in creating bureaucratic systems of organization. And so that's what conscientiousness boils down to, and that's what you find in a lot of managerial jobs, what you find in accountants, what you find in lawyers, what you find in business executives and things of that nature. So that's the way that the majority of the world is set up. Most of the world is conscientious to a degree, especially in the Western world, as we are something that is, as the Western world in America particularly, is something that is hinged upon deadlines, bureaucratic measures, and institutions and their relation to one another, and creating means of expression and fiscal gain for the individual within the setting of America. So the fact that corporations and things exist, obviously this is a country of conscientiousness, and the fact that being dutiful and having work ethic and being a hustler in a sense is something that's valued, per se. Being reliable, having appointments, showing up on time, being early to things, being counted upon, being a team player essentially, or being a team player enough for one to climb up a social ladder or a bureaucratic ladder. The fact that people make it a desire and a motive and something to express to climb up a corporate and bureaucratic ladder, that is a pointing to conscientiousness, as the world is comprised of SJs and SPs that adore the SJs that comprise and make the structures of the world. And the occasional, and I'm taking this from something a viewer said, and the occasional NTJ leaders that come about and are very good at dominating these structures and leading them to new heights with visions, per se. But at the same time, they have a antagonistic relationship with these types too, but they find that they get along with them more so than in P's. And it's to say that the trait of openness to experience is a domain of for is the characteristic of individuals who like to explore the domain of what's unknown. They consistently want to stand on the boundary between what's known and what's unknown and continue to push that frontier, create new perspectives and ways for us to understand the world and see life essentially, and conquer territory and terrain that is not very really sought after or is in the motivational thoughts of the larger sphere and populace. It's why when people say that art is uh, merely decorative, they don't understand that artists, and this is something why INTPs, INFPs, ENFPs, ENTPs, and even INFJs tend to concern themselves in INTJs, even ENTJs, though maybe not as much, but even ENTJs, the NTs, the NJs, and the NPs. Why we tend to concern ourselves with art and the aesthetic is because we load high in a trait called openness to experience. But what we do not create is things for just um, consumption and appeasement or to be pleasing to masses or to be decorative. Art is not a decorative thing or an expression for just mass consumption, but is the act of exploration. Art is exploration. That's why I say that mathematics can be art, science in some respects can be art. Um, Many things can take on the uh, spirit and the ethos of art or aesthetics because it's exploring the deepness and the aspects of what it means to be human and what we understand about reality and the way that something can be perceived per se. And artists are always in the business of creating perspectives and ways for us to see. The world now sees in an impressionistic landscape to where it only saw in a realistic landscape prior to before. We never understood the world in impressionistic terms until the impressionists as artists came about. It's the artist's job to revolutionize what we see and what we can think and know about the world, and that's why art and creativity and genius are so tightly linked with one another, but that there are multifarious aspects that make up each of them. The core contributing force is this tendency to always confront what is not known and what's unexplored, and that's what drives the creative type of individual. Now the problem is this world is completely conscientious in many aspects, and the thing is that in this society we want people to get around in that. NPs consistently talk about their struggles in it, but it's because we're open to experience and the world is not per se. And that is the basis of learning for highly creative individuals. Highly creative individuals do not learn things by rote per se. They can if they have to, but that's not how I like to learn, and that's not how I want to learn. I don't want to accept what's given to me per se, and I'm not particularly interested in it either. I think that what is salient to whatever I'm investigating is what I want to get known in whatever tools I need to master in order to conduct greater levels of investigation per se. That's why I've studied, even though logic is something that comes very innately to me, I studied formal logic so that I could better investigate the connective patterns of other people's thoughts. Not my thoughts, but understanding the world's thoughts and trying to see with what I think versus what it thinks, where things stand, where they might be wrong and where I might be wrong, where I might be right and where they might be wrong, and how to connect the bridge between the two and create some dialogue per se. It's the means of communication in which I accept anything that is sort of, or the necessity for communication that I accept anything that is general, even in mathematics. I like mathematics because it helps me explore the physical world more so. I like physics because it helps me explore the material world. I like science as a technique and really an algorithmic platform because it's a very powerful tool in accessing physical reality. Now, however, this is something I'm noticing in my own educational experience. the dissemination of science is the power of science, which is also its villain, is the fact that it is a very powerful algorithm. That the field only needs hardworking individuals, per se, to continue to crank the levers of already established techniques and methods. That's why it's called the scientific method, to produce knowledge. And you cannot really, in this day and age in science, say something that is completely revolutionary and new and stick it out there and people get on with it. They will consider you somewhat of a heretic, per se, or think you're absolutely batshit crazy. Because what you are trying to do, per se, is present a new way of understanding reality. And though that's what science says it's after, that is not what the heart of the field is after, per se, but incremental advancements into the perception of what we understand about the world. It is not until science historically has been faced with great deals of problems in its infrastructure of knowledge and conundrums that geniuses have been able to come by and kind of slip into the field, per se, unbeknownst to it, because it's dealing with its problems, and insurrect something new. But if the field is static and there aren't problems, you won't find geniuses. Because one, you need constraints and you need problems, but two, there needs to be a vehicle, per se, and a way for them to express themselves, because very really bureaucracy is the complete antithesis of creativity. It is. That's why INTPs hate it. That's why INFPs hate it. That's why most types hate creative and open types hate bureaucracy. That's why INTJs will put up with the bullshit, and ENTJs will say that they put up with the bullshit. They will put up with it, and they will even see the utility of it in some sense in getting people to do what they want. But fundamentally, they think like me, that it's fucking stupid, and we have to do it because of the way that we are as creatures, but not necessarily because it's any more salient in our advancement of understanding or getting what we really want, per se, because they're fundamentally concerned with meaning and other things too, like other types. So is just to say that the bureaucratic way that things are set up, and when you stifle things and make them rigid and do not allow them to be changed or anybody to mess with them, per se, without being criminalized or vilified and cast out of the group, per se, because that's why creative people really try to live outside the system, because the system is fundamentally against creativity. Systems do not make creativity. Systems within an individual